Now, when did you become passionate about your focus?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, my current focus in terms of leadership in game development, I would say it was that program at University of Pennsylvania and Wharton School of Business, and especially studying under Adam Grant because it was such an eye opener to me. Because I really didn't understand leadership and what a leader's job actually is.
Yeah,
Right? I had all of these um, misapprehensions
yeah,
from watching bad TV shows and watching bad
right.
leaders on TV shows and
Yeah,
thinking need to be bossy, need to go around, use a lot of force, tell
yeah,
people what to do, keep everything organized. And so as a result, in my early leadership efforts, I was doing all the wrong things, right?
yeah,
Um, so I had a few cases before I went into that program where I really failed as a leader, right?
yeah,
I got no one else to blame but myself. But once I took that course, looking back on things like what happened at Ion Storm Austin, and that course put it into perspective of how what should have actually happened. I
yeah,
knew that, it had been sitting in the back of my mind like this is a train wreck, absolute train wreck. What went wrong? Right. And before I went into that course, I was like, okay, the technology was horribly broken. So of course you can't, make a great game when your technology is broken. But then after I took this course, I realized, no, the game you're making is a reflection of the team that built it, right? It's almost a perfect mirror. So if you want to make a better game, you have to build a better team.
Welcome to your new podcast, Optimum Ideation, with the host and Bridges. Idea interviews. The best of human ideation. Everyone has a superpower. But times are hard, many are in the darkness of their own mind, in need of a helping hand. Helping others to become whole.
Are sponsoring brands.
Third-party people, NFT fashion, TGC fashion, Mark Point.
Enjoy the show with today's guest.
Paul Tozour.
Welcome, everybody, to the Optimum Ideation podcast. Today's guest is Paul Tozour, and we're just going to go straight into questions. He's got a history in video games as well as authoring a book, and he's also been recently getting into biohacking. So we're going to get into the questions right here with him, starting with, what is your story, your resume, and how did you get to here?
Yeah. So I spent about 26, 27, 28 years in the video game industry. Started off doing documentation, became a programmer and designer simultaneously. Did a lot of programming, especially artificial intelligence programming, game design and technical design. Worked my way into essentially started my own company, Mothership Entertainment, in 2013. Very tiny team of just 4 people, plus working with a lot of outside contractors. We shipped a game called Aven Colony for PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 in the middle of 2017. And so, yeah. And at that point, I pretty much retired toward the end of 2018. I decided to become like a longevity biohacker and learn as much as I could about the science of longevity. I also started writing my book, The Four Swords. It doesn't get released until probably late May or sometime in June of this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. The book is mostly written for audiobook format. It is we hired a cast of more than 35 voice actors to play all the different roles. So
Wow.
essentially, I narrated the entire book, but then we had professional voice actors overdub all the different characters, and it really makes it fun to listen to. It's like an audio play because as they're talking, you can be like, oh, that's Bentley, that's Mickey, that's Allison, and everybody has different accents, so you can tell them apart, very quickly. You've got a guy from India, a guy from Britain, a guy from Ireland, a guy from West Texas, and so, you can instantly tell all the accents apart.
That's so cool, man. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, it's a book about leadership, illustrated through the point of view of 4 hardworking game developers, and it's trying to tie in. It's called, the subtitle is A Parable of Leadership, Video Games, and Dead Dragons, and so it's trying to tie together, the high level of thinking about values and culture and leadership and how those are tied together to the nitty-gritty day-to-day operations of difficult conversations and stubborn bosses and dysfunctional teams and broken technology and just some of the horrible situations that can arise in video game development,
Yeah.
which seems like such fun from the outside, but it's really, really hard work and can be really grueling and taxing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, one day I hope to get more involved into video games. Just now, I don't really have the time, but I have been kind of learning it on the side, and just the graphic design, and then the animation, and then and then the storylines, and it brings together all these different aspects.
Yeah, it
And
brings together a ton of different disciplines. So it's a really unique
yes,
industry because you've got these, hardcore technical programmers working side by side with artists who
yeah,
very often, not always, but very often only think visually,
yeah,
and working together with game designers who are focused on what is the gameplay, what is the story, what is the player experience from moment to moment, which is a discipline that really doesn't have a parallel in any other industry.
exactly. No,
Yeah.
I'm loving it. I think that's a direction for me, but for the time being, I got to keep doing what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
But interviewing people like yourself, it's just inspirational for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, and especially if you're writing a book such as you are, I think that's going to be a huge hit.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I got to say the audiobook is going to be a hell of a lot of fun to listen to. I'm really, really happy with the way it turned out. It really feels like a little Netflix series. Have you seen the HBO show Silicon Valley?
No, I don't really
Okay.
watch too much
Yeah,
TV.
yeah. Okay. Really. Anyway, the really interesting show. Some of your viewers may have seen it, but it's very relatable for anybody who's worked in technology. But it's sort of like that, but with a lot of lessons in leadership, values, and culture built into it. And the story is designed to illustrate all of these lessons that the characters are learning over the course of the book. And I was able to draw from a lot of my own experience in game development and some of the situations I've been in, or some of the stories I've heard from my fellow game developers, and put them in a book in a certain way. And so this allows me to tell a lot of those stories without getting sued.
Yeah, yeah. So cool, man. I'm interested for sure.
Cool, man.
So to become who we are, what layers did you have to reveal to become who you are now?
Yeah. So one of the biggest ones was a huge transformative experience for me. I got a master's in technology management at the University of Pennsylvania in a degree program co-sponsored by the Wharton School of Business. And it was a program, so it was an MSc degree. It was called, the EMTM Masters in Technology, Executive Masters in Technology Management program, but it was sort of like half a Wharton program because it was taught by Wharton professors in the Wharton classrooms with the same curriculum as the Wharton curriculum, right? But it was mostly designed for working executives in tech who needed to develop their leadership skills and their soft skills, right? And so I went into that program, and probably the most important class for me was I studied organizational behavior and design under Adam Grant, who talks about leadership a lot. He's got his own podcast. He wrote the book Think Again, which is an absolute classic. He wrote the book Give and Take. He's been the top-rated professor at the Wharton School for, I guess the last 5 years or something like that. He's done a great TED Talk. But he essentially presented this model that is the Wharton School model for building high performance teams that is based on management science, right? So they have this model that you can apply to any team in any industry and figure out, what do we need to do to make a high performing team here, whether you're starting from scratch or you're taking an existing team and trying to improve its performance. So that blew my mind because, well, honestly, before that class, I didn't even know the field of management science existed, right?
Yeah.
Most people in the game industry don't. And leadership in the video game industry is very, I wouldn't say it's, terrible across the board, but it's very spotty, right?
Yeah.
And you've got, some great leaders, but for the most part, it's very hit or miss. and there's a lot of room for improvement. And you have this situation where very often you have these incredibly talented and hardworking artists and game designers and engineers, and they're let down by leadership that isn't up to the task. And so this class, gave me this whole model. I walked out of that class with this whole functional model of like, here's how you take a team and make it a high performing team. And here are the specific things you need to look at. Then I went back for the final project in that class, analyzed the teams that I had worked on according to that model. And it was like, okay, if you look at it according to the model, well, no wonder this one got really good results and this other one didn't. Right. So that inspired me to create something called the Game Outcomes Project, which I published on what's now called Game Developer. I think it's gamedeveloper.com, used to be called Gamma Citra, but I published that back in 2014, worked with 2 academics and a bunch of other game developers. And we essentially sent out this survey to, a couple hundred video game developers and asked them a bunch of questions about the culture of the organization of, what is the leadership like? What kind of, do you work a lot of crunch? How did all the different aspects of this project work out? Were people able to provide feedback without fearing like they might lose their job? All sorts of questions like that. And then we had 4 questions at the end about the outcome of the project. What was the return on investment, in terms of a percentage of what was spent in development? What was the critical reviews? What were the critical reviews of the game in the aggregate? Was the project delayed? And how long were the delays? And was the team happy with the final product? And we found these huge correlations between most of the cultural factors based on 273 responses. So it's statistically significant between a ton of these cultural factors and the outcomes that fit exactly with what the Wharton model predicted. So that was like, okay, this model is real. And the model is not all that different from what you read in most good management and leadership books, right? 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni is a great example. So anyway, all that inspired me to write this book and to essentially put a lot of that thought into this book.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's a lot of helpful information there. So, those were the layers that you removed and helped become who you are. But what is your next layer to remove?
That's hard to say. Certainly I'm not very good at, marketing and PR and things like that. It's
maybe we should team up.
Yeah, maybe we should. Maybe we should. That's an area where I've close to zero expertise. And so, now that we've pressed the button on publishing my book and the ball is in the publisher's court, I've got a lot of work to do in figuring out, what do I need to build publicity. So
yeah. Well, heck, I'll help you out there.
So that's a skill set I certainly need to develop.
Well, I got free content on the site.
All right, great.
But if you need
I'll check it out.
I'm right here.
I'll check it out, Tim. Thank you.
Let's see. What trials and tribulations have you been through?
Yeah. So I've been through some very trying game development projects, right? Some of them have gone pretty smoothly, but there was one, I worked at Ion Storm Austin back in like 2001. I think it was, 2000 and 2001. That was pretty much a train wreck. That was an incredibly difficult experience, that took me a long time to really recover from. We also had some issues with when we were working on our game Avon Colony at Mothership Entertainment, the studio I founded here in Austin in late 2013, early 2014. We were working with a publisher, and I'm not going to name any names, but we were working with a publisher up in Michigan that was very stubborn, very closed-minded. They would forget everything that they had promised after about 6 to 8 weeks and be like, "Oh, I never said that." And it's like, well, the whole team heard you say that, right? They sort of snapped. They had gotten in above their head with a couple other developers, and in the middle of at the end of 2014, the beginning of 2015, they basically pulled out of the publishing deal, and I had to do everything I could to try and salvage that relationship for the sake of the survival of the studio, and funneled a huge amount of my own life savings into the studio.
Yeah.
Ultimately was not able to save that publishing relationship, which ended up being for the best, right? Because if your publisher is coming to you and saying, we want you to put these features in your game, but you know they're features that the customer is going to hate, that are going to
Yeah.
kill the quality of your game, you've
Yeah.
got to walk away. You've got to do what's best for the customer. The customer is the boss, right?
Yeah.
It's not the guy sitting in the corner office, right? It's not the guy coming to you and saying, you know, do X, Y, and Z. It's the guy who's going to be buying your game at the end of the day, because that guy has the ability to fire the entire company, right, if he doesn't like your product. So anyway, I eventually did have to shovel almost all my life savings into that project. I'm not going to go into dollar figures, but it was a hell of a lot more money than I ever wanted to spend. And so it was a horrible situation to be in. We got saved by a really great publisher in the UK called Team 17. They're famous for games like Worms and a few others. But they basically took a look at our game. They're like, we love this. We think it's going to be the next City Skylines. We'd love to publish it, and we will port it to Xbox and PlayStation on our own dime. And we'll take a big cut of that and a smaller cut of the PC version. And so we did the math. It was a tough call, and some people in the studio were saying, no, don't do this deal. We're not going to sell on console. But in the end, it was the right decision to go with them, because they improved the final quality of the product. They didn't try and change what we were making. They were just trying to port it to Xbox and PlayStation and support us as best they could. And we ended up selling similar, levels of the game, and both in terms of revenue and unit sales, on all three platforms, on PC, on Xbox, and on PlayStation. So if we hadn't done that, it would have been a much worse outcome.
Wow. Wow, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, when did you become passionate about your focus?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, my current focus in terms of leadership in game development, I would say it was that program at University of Pennsylvania and Wharton School of Business, and especially studying under Adam Grant, because it was such an eye opener to me, because I really didn't understand leadership and what a leader's job actually is.
Yeah.
Right? I had all of these misapprehensions from watching bad TV shows and watching bad leaders on TV shows, and thinking need to be bossy, need to go around, use a lot of force, tell people what to do, keep everything organized. So as a result, in my early leadership efforts, I was doing all the wrong things, right? So I had a few cases before I went into that program where I really failed as a leader, right? I got no one else to blame but myself. But once I took that course, looking back on things like, what happened at Ion Storm Austin, and that course put it into perspective of what should have actually happened. I knew that it had been sitting in the back of my mind, like, this is a train wreck, absolute train wreck. What went wrong? Right. And before I went into that course, I was like, okay, the technology was horribly broken. So of course you can't, make a great game when your technology is broken. But then after I took this course, I realized, no, the game you're making is a reflection of the team that built it, right? It's almost a perfect mirror. And so if you want to make a better game, you have to build a better team. And so you have to use these tools for building a high performance team, right? And these are eternal truths, right? The video game industry it's kind of a special snowflake. It likes to think, oh, we're so unique because we got designers and artists and programmers all working together. So no lessons from anywhere else apply to us. But no, teams are eternal. Team dynamics, team psychology, these are eternal truths that were happening when they built the pyramids thousands of years ago, right? The dynamics don't change that much. And so there's a ton that you can learn from outside your own industry. There's a ton that you can learn if you look at modern management science and educate yourself.
Yeah. I love the analogies there, and I agree with you fully. You probably already mentioned some of this, but who were some of the great contributors to your character, or mentors, if you will?
Well, definitely my dad is the first one, right?
Okay.
My father, Doug Tozour, he ran an extremely successful air conditioning company in Philadelphia. I decided, air conditioning really wasn't my thing. I wasn't interested when I was a kid in doing air conditioning. I needed to be in a creative industry.
Yeah.
But a lot of what he taught me about leadership and management mirrored perfectly what I learned from Adam Grant at University of Pennsylvania. It was just coming much more from a practical perspective rather
Yeah.
than from an academic perspective. So, absolutely, I would say my father is the biggest one. But
Very
some
good.
of it has also come from working with or working under individuals who, you start to get a sense of how their psychology really operates, and realizing I don't ever want to be like that. I don't want
Yeah.
to ever treat people the way this guy does. I
Right.
don't want to ever use the negotiation tactics that they use.
Right.
I want to be the opposite of that. And some people in this world are great examples of what not to be. And you can learn a hell of a lot and grow yourself as a person just by doing the opposite in every way that you
Exactly.
can. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Oh, and when you first started on your journey, what is something that was more challenging than you had expected?
Yeah. So, teamwork, um, teamwork, leadership, team building. That's the thing that I've seen happen over and over in the video game industry is, again, you've got super bright, super talented, super motivated engineers, artists, and designers coming together, trying to make a game, and they end up having all these arguments, and the management doesn't know how to resolve it. They have personality conflicts. They have these huge misalignments in vision where everybody on the team literally thinks the game that they're building is different from what the guy sitting right next to them thinks that they're building. And Getting all of that working is a far bigger challenge and far more central and more important than I realized at the start, right? Because
Yeah.
when you get into video games, you're thinking about the games. You're thinking, oh, I want to design this game. And if I design this, this will be, you've got this burning product vision in your head. And I'm very good at the product vision, but it took me a long time to realize if you want that product vision to happen, you've got to build a strong team. And this is the set of skills you need to do that. Because
Yeah.
again, the game is a reflection of the team that created it.
Yeah. 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 In my business, you have to really, mold together a bunch of different people
Mm-hmm.
to get a final product. So
Yeah,
I
and and
understand fully.
and really, there's a super important skill set as a leader of, like, when something is going wrong at your organization, do you have the ability, right? If I'm a programmer and my program crashes, if I'm a good programmer, I'm going to step into it very carefully, look at it in the debugger, figure out what is the state of all the variables, how is what is the problem that is occurring, and then find the correct fix for that problem, fix it, and make sure it doesn't happen again, right? But that skill is actually pretty rare in leadership. If there's a bug in your team, you need to be able to know how the team should be working, step in, figure out, okay, what is Bob saying? What is Tony saying? Why do Bob and Tony disagree? Which one of them is right? And maybe they're both wrong, right? Very often they're both wrong. Um, but figure out what is the right answer in this scenario, and then how do we fix this moving forward? So
Yeah. And when to lead and when to follow sometimes too.
yeah,
A
yeah,
good leader is a good follower sometimes. So
absolutely, and a good listener. That's the most important
yes.
thing. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Um, now, who were you at your lowest points? And the inverse of that will be who are you at your best?
Yeah. So at my lowest point, again, I would say that was all the way back at Ion Storm Austin, back in 2001. I was burned out. My productivity was really low. The technology on our game was so broken it was almost unusable. Nobody was getting anything done. The designers were sitting around in the design pit playing Magic the Gathering all the time because they thought the game was going to get canceled at any moment. And I was overweight, I was unhealthy, I was depressed. I didn't recognize that I was all those things, and I didn't see a way out of my situation, right? And I didn't understand what I needed to do to get things working in the right direction. So that's who I was at my worst. Who I am at my best is, I'd say, who I've been recently. past couple of years is somebody who's, essentially retired from the video game industry, working to optimize himself in every way that he can, improve my health, and who can look back on all those things and be like, here's what needed to happen on that team. Here's what I should have done from my position and how I could have made that change happen. And if I ever end up on a team like that again, here's the role that I can play.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. What is your best piece of advice for an audience that truly wants to better themselves?
Okay, so the one piece of advice I give everybody is take a negotiation class. When I took I took the organizational behavior and design class at University of Pennsylvania under Adam Grant, and that was great. But take a negotiation class, because that is the one class you will take in your life where almost every situation you're in, you can apply the lessons from the negotiation class. I took an awesome negotiation class at University of Pennsylvania as part of that master's program. And I knew going into it, like, I'm a terrible negotiator. I need this class because I don't have any mental framework. And once again, I walked out of that class with this whole framework of like, here's how you approach a negotiation. Many years later, I took a seminar in Las Vegas with Stuart Diamond, who is now teaching negotiation at Wharton School. His book is called Getting More. I strongly recommend reading that book. Yeah. It makes it sound a little mercenary, but the book is actually great. And it's not recommending that you use hardball negotiation tactics at every opportunity. It's actually saying the opposite. The book actually makes it clear that almost every interaction in life is a negotiation at some level, right? And be really respectful and cautious and collaborative in how you approach those negotiations, and look for ways that you can build something together that's bigger than the sum of its parts. Yeah. And there is a place for the hardcore power tools of negotiation and playing hardball and walking away from the table, all the things they taught me in the first Wharton School negotiation class that I took. But read Stuart Diamond's book, Getting More, and you'll have a much better understanding of here's how to really make negotiation work for you. And here's how to conceptualize that almost every human interaction is at some level a negotiation. And if you understand that, and you understand the tools that you can bring to the table, you're going to have, better results.
Yeah. Thank you. What practices or techniques throughout your day or week makes your day or week a success?
Yeah. So the biggest things, I've gotten really focused on my health in the last couple of years, because spending like 26, 27, 28 years in the video game industry, depending on how you count them, it just took a huge toll on my health. And so I've, become sort of a biohacker and focused my daily schedule around just optimizing my health, physical and mental health as much as I can, wellness, nutrition, all of that. So one of them is making sure I get enough sleep every night. Sleep is king. If I'm tired in the morning, I get more sleep, and I go to bed super early. I track my sleep with an Oura ring. I've got a very carefully regimented diet, doing intermittent fasting, taking all the right supplements, try and do sauna as many times a week as I can. I sometimes, spend time in an altitude tent that's like low oxygen levels, which is really, really good for fitness and weight loss, things like that. Also do red light therapy. I do a workout almost every day. So
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm into teas and all sorts of different things as well. Ashwagandha roots and grounding myself,
Cool. Green tea is awesome for you.
Yes, sir. Moringa tea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are already writing a book, but if you ever wrote another book, what would it be about?
Yeah. Part of me wants to write a book on everything that's happening with the science of longevity, but the science is changing so fast that it's like you can't really write a book, because if you spend 6 months to write that book, it's going to be obsolete by the time it comes out, because everything that's happening is happening so quickly. So I might write another book about video game development and leadership in video game development. Maybe I'll write a sequel to the book that's going to be published in late May or sometime in June. Just have to see how it does. I've had a few folks tell me I should also try and get this book turned into a Netflix or HBO HBO miniseries. So I'm certainly going to look into that. And if anybody listening is interested in that, look me up.
Yeah. Now we're kind of wrapping up here, and we've already talked about the book a little bit. Do you have any networking events, book, product, service, or invention that we can help you promote to the audience?
Yeah, no services or anything like that. I'm not currently doing consulting. Certainly, if there are people in the video game industry who are interested in consulting, send me a message. But I have not been doing much of that at this point. The main thing is my book, The Four Swords: A Parable of Leadership, Video Games, and Dead Dragons, coming out late May or sometime in June.
Okay, good.
And buy the audiobook version because it's going to be the best.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. What is the best way for the audience to support and also get in contact with you?
Yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn. I've got a very unique last name. First name is Paul, last name is Tozour. So just follow me on LinkedIn, and I post previews of the audiobook every week or two.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Paul.
What's coming? Yeah, thank you.
It's super interesting. I'm glad that you were able to break some time out for us, and I'll gladly promote this to our audience.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.